So whether it's like architecture or interiors, always responds to the context. Like you see the construction of everything. What you see is what you get. There is no facade whatsoever in terms of even the design language of this house.
The way the column sits on the rough and the ragged edges of the raw exposed stone base, or the way the vaulted ceiling rests on the beams.
It was quite a challenge for us when this project came to us because we didn't want to create something which is a typical postcard imagery of Goa, but so we wanted to bring in that charm of Indo-Portuguese architecture, Goan colors, or the culture of Goa, but in a very non-traditional way. For us, for this, I would say that this was the first project where the sense of smell also sort of became an element of design, that how you bring in that.
A warm good afternoon from the Architect's Diary, and I'm Simran Khare, co-editor at the Architect's Diary. Today, we have with us architect Satyajeet Patwardhan and Pashmin Shah, the co-founders of Amoeba Designs. Amoeba Designs is a young and dynamic firm inspired by the concept of wabi-sabi, an intuitive way of living that encourages them to celebrate the beauty of a naturally imperfect world and aim to manifest this approach in all of their projects. Founded in 2012, they focus on creating ecological, culturally specific, and contemporary built environment. As a team of internationally trained architects, they bring global insights and best practices to their buildings. So, without a further ado, we can begin with the presentation by Amoeba Designs and followed by an interview session. I hand over the stage to you.
Thank you, Simran, for the lovely introduction.
Thanks for having us.
So, should we start with the presentation directly then?
Yeah, sure, works.
All right, so like we'll be presenting 3 projects today, and the first one we're going to talk about is the Stream House, and
So just briefly, we are there are 3 projects. One is Stream House, the other is a holiday home that we recently completed, and the last one is the house around the courtyard, 2 courtyards.
courtyards.
So all of these 3 are very different projects at different stages, and that way it's an interesting mix that we can talk about our work, also how it has come to what it is right now.
Yeah, and how like basically in the process of sort of how every project evolves. So Stream House, I mean, like why Stream House would be probably the first question, but like before that, I think it's very important to understand the client and his personality, because most of our projects they always sort of derive the thought from the people we are designing for. So whether it's like architecture or interiors, always responds to the context, and like it revolves around that. So when we first met Nikhil, his like his personality is like very different from like what most of the people that you come across. He's like extremely free spirited individual, yet like he's not bound by the norms of the society. He is what he is, and like the way he comes across as, like, there's a great deal of truth about his being. There is no facade whatsoever, and that's basically gave us the clue in terms of how should we approach this project. And it started on the lines of Japanese minimalism, where like you see the construction of everything. What you see is what you get. There is no facade whatsoever in terms of even the design language of this house. Apart from that, or along with that, what we were trying to sort of discover is also the sense of like Indian architecture, which talks about like space within a space. And because it was a very linear and sort of little odd shaped plan, so we had to sort of devise strategies in terms of how we sort of create like different spaces within the same space. So this is like, I mean, the first slide was about like the dining, like the living room, and the second slide you can see is the dining area. And here you can see like how exactly the whole space is evolving, like in terms of like the furniture or the lighting and the minimalism of the overall space.
Yeah. So what we are saying is, for the geometric language, what Satyajit is saying is The house doesn't let the geometrical language overpower the presence of organic and imperfect elements planned around the house. In fact, the flow of the stream or the wave of the skirting that you can see on the wall that is running on the entire walls of all the walls of the entire house becomes more prominent due to this juxtaposition and doesn't let geometry dominate the aesthetics of the place. The vaulted ceiling adds the element of drama to the place as the light magically flows along the curved surfaces. If you notice that there is a certain sense of lightness around the house, it comes through the materiality and the design language, be it the way the column sits on the rough and the ragged edges of the raw exposed stone base, or the way the vaulted ceiling rests on the beams. The entire house is adorned in elemental colors, being that of wood, whites, and grays, to imbue a sense of subtlety inside the house.
So you can see here like how the columns are particularly resting on those stone bases, and like the overall space has a sense of zen and calmness. And in spite of being like structured around the geometrical sort of formation of the space, these free flowing elements that you see like the stream and like the skirting edges, they don't let the geometry overpower the entire design. At the beginning of the project, like Nicole had asked us once, like why stream and why not river? And so we knew it's a stream because stream has a very different sort of energy altogether. Rivers sort of they slow down with time. The civilization start happening on the banks of the river, and this his energy was more like a stream. It wasn't like a river like. So it has that like childlike quality in him, and that's something which pushed us to create something which we probably had never done before, or we didn't have any reference for. Because it also sometimes happens like where people ask, okay, have you done something similar, or has anybody else done something similar to something like this? And honestly, we didn't have any reference for this, and we told him like the reason this element has come about is because of the way we saw you. Now you can even see the kitchen here. Like, so there's no presence of any hardware as such. We have tried to sort of keep the space so minimal and so pristine in a way where, there's nothing extra which is adding or distracting you from the core thought of this house. So if even within the bedroom, you can see that like the sense of space within space, which we were talking about earlier, like in a Indian context. So even that thing happens here. Even like for the table, you can see that joinery being visible, or for the bed area where we have sort of tried to bring in that raw-faced stone cladding behind the wall. The wardrobes were inspired from the shoji screen of Japanese homes. So it's sort of, it's not a purist approach, but at the same time, it's sort of trying to create something which is deeply contextual, people specific, and like whom are you designing it for. So the stream-like pattern that runs pretty much all across, all along the home, because it has got a very linear plan to it. And whereas like there's this one room like the son's room which is attached to the living, that's where we sort of broke away from that pattern. And here also you can see how the overall design aesthetics has evolved. So even when you see the bookshelf there, so like the whole joinery of everything is pretty much visible. So there is no facade which is hiding the truth of it. And this is exactly the thought while designing this house: is what you see is what you get.
Also, just to end with, I just want to quickly talk about the artwork of the entire space.
So now,
yeah, so artwork in this house has been very carefully curated. Right behind the dining table, there is a series of 5 pieces of artwork, which are inspired by illustrations of waves and ripples done more than a century ago. An old bonsai full of wisdom makes one gravitate towards it as it exists like living and breathing artwork in the house. A circular artwork made out of tree barks, old weathered plants, and rough stonework show how the contrast and eventualities of life coexist in this space. An old earthen pot with a dried branch as a decor element further celebrates the thought put behind in designing the space. As a whole, all the different elements of the house come together to display the effervescent beauty of these imperfections that are even present in life in this house.
Yeah, so next one we're going to talk about a tropical home in Goa. So yeah, we all like as kids or like while have been growing up have always been to Goa, and Goa has always been that popular sort of holiday destination for most of us. And we always have had this very strong image of Goa, which is somewhat postcard image of Goa as well, like inspired from Indo-Portuguese architecture, lots of colors and like bright facades. So it was quite a challenge for us when this project came to us because we didn't want to create something which is a typical postcard imagery of Goa, but we rather wanted to reinterpret Goa and sort of put it in a present context and present it the way it sort of carries the charm of the space, and yet it's not a very obvious representation of Goa. And that's how sort of this project evolved. And of course, because it's a second home, so there are certain factors which do play on the mind, like whether we want, if somebody is coming to Goa say for a weekend or like for a week long visit, I mean, you want to be in that sense of Goa as much as possible. So we wanted to bring in that charm of Indo-Portuguese architecture, Goan colors, or the culture of Goa, but in a very non traditional way. And
Contemporary.
yeah, it was more of a contemporary take. So like the way you'll find those wooden ceiling in the old houses of Goa. So here we sort of try to mimic that, but like it brings with the pastel green shade. And like throughout the house, you can see like the terrazzo flooring running. Even under the dining table, you can see that interesting circular pattern happening, which is again like highlighting the look, the placement of the table, and it sort of combines that with the light above. So you can see that like sense of color coming in, and which is a very like non-traditional and non-typical way compared to what you otherwise get to see in Goa. Again, if you can see the black staircase, which is taking you like to the first floor. So again, like most of the times, what happens is like staircases merely become a way to sort of go up and down, and they don't really serve any function beyond that. And here we wanted to sort of bring in as a almost like a sculptural element which is holding both the floors together and adding some sense of a like a focal point for the whole design. Now, even when you see look at the bedroom here, I mean, again the use of color is a very in a very non-traditional way. Again, the choices of colors, I mean, what you see around like the sea or like the flora and fauna of Goa, the colors have been borrowed from that. But then again, like how you sort of put together in the today's context, of course, like the elements like arch-shaped walls or like arches, it's quintessential Goa. I think that definitely reminds you of like what you see in Goa. And along with that, how you bring in the sense of old world charm, which is like you can see here the cement tiles being used in the in the bedroom, where those patterns, and like we all have seen that in the older house. But again, the design is not a traditional one. It's something which is more today's design. And so it's more about like how you sort of balance like all those elements. So you're not trying to sort of create something which is totally unfamiliar. So something which is familiar yet redefining the tradition, and something which attracts or echoes with the contemporary sensibilities. So as you see, like the transition from the bedroom to the washroom, like how exactly that transition is taking place, what sort of tonalities we're using for the bathrooms, like the checkered flooring also has its own charm, and along with that, like the colors of the sand, which sort of reflect on the walls of the bathroom. And even in the bedrooms, like sort of again the placement of bed is sort of a little unique compared to what you get to see in most of the bedrooms. So it's somewhere in the middle, so you also have a study like space behind the bed. Again, you can see like the use of cement tiles, like this half and half theme running across the walls, which is again used to be a very I mean, in the olden days, like this was almost like used to be the character of most of the houses, and then we forgot about that. So idea was also to sort of bring in certain elements of the past and put them together in a rather contemporary way. And then of course like there are certain like bedrooms where you bring in that wooden ceiling feeling, because it also adds a bit of warmth to the overall space. And from the outdoor, like this is how the space looks like. So even for the doors and windows, rather than going for the wooden windows, we introduce the color here as well. So it's almost like I would say like a representation of contemporary Goa in our way. And the next house we're going to talk about is house around the two courtyards. So again, a very different project from the above two, something which is deeply rooted in the soil and which connects with the land in a very different way. Because when we came on board on this for this project, it's basically like the groundwork had already begun and like the architectural sort of framework was taking place. And when we first saw this place, the overall scale of the house was quite loud in a sense, like it was quite dominating. And when we so that's where we felt the need to sort of tone down the entire house, because it almost was designed like a resort scale house. So it needed to be made more human, more grounded, and more rooted in the land. And that's how sort of the overall design of this house evolved. So as you see the courtyards here, so we pretty much leveled them up and brought them to the level where you can just simply walk into the wall in these courtyards. Also, like there's something which is very interesting that happened like in this project, or which was like sort of as a response to the climate, because the climate here is pretty harsh. Like in terms of the sun is like very bright, you always see the very sharp and like very striking contrast. So it was also important how you tone down those contrasts, because when I walk into the courtyard from inside spaces, I mean, like with the use of white color, it probably would have like shrunk my pupils. Where here we deliberately went for the cement finish wall, where it tones down that contrast, and you can just smoothly or like very effortlessly you can walk into the courtyard without even feeling that transition of it. Even the brick flooring, the choice of brick flooring also came from uh, the same thought, where in a harsh sun the flooring never gets as hot as like some other stone material would get. So it almost like provides that much needed relief for your feet when you're walking barefoot on this in this courtyard. And towards the evening, when you sort of like sprinkle water over these brick tiles, they sort of give you that that peculiar sense of or smell of Indian monsoon. And they immediately just changes they change the microclimate of this courtyard, making it much cooler compared to like what it would be during the day. So it's very important how you are sort of responding to the context on a very different levels. Like, so for us, for this, I would say that this was the first project where the sense of smell also sort of became an element of design, that how you bring in that. And like also like the sound to a certain extent, because like you can see the way we have sort of planned the trees here. Okay, I think I lost it. Yeah. So when we went there, like many birds have already made their this home like their home, and like so you can see like bulbul and sparrows and myna, and like it was like a school of birds like in the courtyard. And this is how like sort of the interior has panned out. So again, like very simple palette or something which is very earthy but yet very contemporary. So the entire ceiling, we deliberately went for wooden ceiling for the entire house because of the height of it. We wanted to sort of tone it down. We wanted to make it more human, and the scale sort of demanded to make it like something which sort of can relate to the land and becomes an extension of this terrain. So even like when we first approached this site, like this actually you pass through quite a long stretch of barren land with a lot of boulders around along the way. So that is something you can also see in the courtyard. So we brought some of those to sort of make this house as an extension of the landscape that you travel through while getting here. So you can see the dining space and the kitchen here. And so there's like behind, like there's a way to sort of, there were like a series of like multiple steps, just like a straight flight staircase taking you down. So here we sort of thought of introducing a kund like structure behind, where it also turns into the seating spot in the evenings, where the family loves to sit and during the winters, like they can have a small fire pit like in the middle, and so it has almost turned into that sort of a meeting space for everyone in the family towards the evening time. And that's how we can see how the like sort of the bedrooms have shaped up, and like the way that language of this thing extends further in the bathroom. So yeah, very simple minimalist project, and something which sort of echoes the uh, I would say the character of the land. And the last one we'll talk about is a mud house, which is still like I would say it's in uh, it's yet to start. This is in the like Pauna region, which we have just started with the construction. And so here the take was very different. We wanted to bring in something which is more contemporary, but interpreting the vernacular architecture in a today's manner. So the way you can see the plan has evolved, and so we intend to build this house entirely in mud and lime as it sort of goes further. So this is how sort of the plan looks like. It's certainly inspired from the local architecture. We can see the stone plinth with mud walls above. However, the scale of this house is not like the scale of the hut. So you have to create a language which sort of speaks with the today's language of architecture. And that was sort of a very important aspect of this design, that how you create a sense of space which is rooted in the land, rooted in the tradition, and yet it redefines that traditional architecture in a rather contemporary way. So this is how the mud house is going to shape up. So that's pretty much, I would say, what we have done so far and what we are doing at the moment. So yeah, that's us.
Yes, thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. I think it was really lovely to watch all those projects. Even the last project that you showed with the 3D model, it was really amazing. I mean, the minute details that you have incorporated in all of the projects is commendable, and the way nature is playing with the build spaces, it's really beautiful. So, thank you so much for this
Thank
Thank you.
wonderful